Hello, folks. Today I'm going to be giving you the directions on the unit assessment. And so this is our first of, I think, two unit assessments we're going to do. And those are the two things outside of the final project that'll go into the summative category, which is, half of your grade. So you're going to want to make sure that you do a good job on these. Um, this one is focused on the civil rights movement that we've been studying these last, week and a half. So, what you're going to do is compare and contrast in this one. It says information that we've been studying related to the African American civil rights movement with another one of the rights movements that is occurring during this time period. So, 1950 to 1975 is our kind of time window. So, you're going to want to make sure that you focus really in on that era of time. And we'll talk more about that later. But compare and contrast. The idea here is that you're looking for similarities and differences. So a lot of the rights movements that happened during this time period have some similar tactics that they use. Some of the marches, some of the different kinds of demonstrations that are happening. In some ways, they're similar because they're looking for rights. Obviously, the differences are going to be when we get into the particular groups. So if I scroll down below, I can get to the unit assessment directions, and that's the sheet that I'm going to be working off of here. So again, we are looking at comparing and contrasting. Um, and the choices that you have are the Latinx movements that are happening during this time. So this is uh, typically what we connect to Cesar Chavez and the farm workers movement. Um, you could also find information on La Raza Unida, which is kind of a rights movement related to this. Another option is the indigenous rights movement. Typically, that focuses in on AIM, the American Indian movement, and then you can see some of the things that they get connected to. They take over Alcatraz Island, the Alcatraz prison island, the Bureau of Indian Affairs building in Washington D.C. They have an event called the Trail of Broken Treaties. So AIM is the focus there. The women's rights movement, the feminist movement of the 60s and 70s, typically it gets into the 50s as well. This kind of culminates in the push for the ERA. Just by the way, if you have access to Hulu right now, there's a new series on Hulu called Mrs. America that's all about the women's rights movement and the push for the ERA, and it's really pretty good. So if you want to do that one and you have access to Hulu, someone has a login for you, that would be a great way to get a good intro to that one. There are also movements related to young people on college campuses. The Students for a Democratic Society, the SDS, and the free speech movement are parts of that. You have the beginnings of the environmental movement. Last week it was the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. And so getting into kind of the beginnings of that movement, and Rachel Carson's one of the early people that writes about environmental ideas. And then last, this time period is also the beginning of the LGBT rights movement, particularly the Stonewall incident and riots, and then the beginning of gay pride parades. So you're going to pick one of these, and there's lots of options here, lots of choice. So pick something that you think is interesting. When you click on these links, it'll bring you to digital history, which is a good starting point for the research you're going to do. So I would start with digital history and read about your movement, and then you can go into Google as needed. So what you're going to include in your assessment is goals of the movement, leaders of the movement, the methods that participants used to try to make change, and then outcomes. So outcomes could be how society changes. It could be new laws. It could be some conversation about the also the limitations or the ongoing issues that the things that weren't done or completed by the movement. So we're going to be comparing the African American rights movement with whichever of these movements you pick. So we need goals, leaders, methods, and outcome for both movements, okay? And what we're going to use for this is Google Slides. And if you set this up in kind of side-by-side slides, I have an example down here. If you go into any set of slides and you click on layout, you can make it so there are two boxes. And so my example for like the goals slide would be something like this. We have what are the goals of the African American Civil Rights Movement? So this is going to be to check what you've been learning from our study. And then the other piece is you doing a little bit of additional work and making those connections. So again, how are they similar? How are they different? That's what I'll see in the bullets on either side, okay? So slides, first slide is just your name and class period and just a very brief introduction. So tell me which movements you're looking at. Slide 2, 3, 4, and 5 then would be one each for goals, leaders, methods, and outcome. Make sure you're doing compare and contrast. It would be nice for slides 2, 3, 4, and 5 to also have an image or images that kind of show what it is you're talking about. And the last slide, slide 6, is going to be a works cited page. So any sources outside of digital history, we're going to use ezbib.com or something like that so that we can get complete citations. Here's the score breakdown. It's worth 35 points. Again, you're going to have to do a little additional reading beyond what we've already covered, and it'll take a little bit of prep time to put this together. So the deadline is going to be end of the week. I would get going on this one as soon as possible so that you're not falling behind. Make sure that you're staying within this time period, 1950 to 1975. For example, if I pick LGBT rights, there are still people that are, there are still issues related to LGBT groups today that would be considered part of kind of the LGBT rights movement. So I shouldn't see anything in your thing about gay marriage because that really wasn't something that was going on during this time window. I shouldn't see things about you know, bathrooms and you know some of the more current issues should not be a part of your thing. So let's really focus in on the early windows for these rights movements and make some comparisons to the African American rights movement. I think that's it. You're going to email me with questions, and we're going to try to get these in by end of the week. Good luck.